3 days before our wedding, my fiancée asked for closure with her ex-boyfriend and got exactly what she deserved when I gave her all the closure she could handle. I never imagined that a simple text message could change everything in the span of a few hours, but sometimes life has a way of showing you exactly who someone really is when you least expect it. I was sitting in my downtown Seattle office on a Tuesday afternoon, working through some network security updates for our client databases when my phone buzzed with what I initially thought would be another wedding detail from Sophia. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and I genuinely believed we were building something lasting together. She worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm downtown, handling social media campaigns and event planning, while I was a network administrator making a solid 6-figure salary, enough that we'd managed to save for the waterfront venue overlooking Elliott Bay and the romantic San Juan Islands honeymoon we'd both dreamed about since our engagement. Our relationship had always felt stable and comfortable, with shared goals about buying a house in Wallingford and eventually starting a family together. I'd spent months researching the perfect engagement ring, a princess-cut solitaire that I knew she'd love, and she'd seemed genuinely excited about our future together whenever we talked about our 5-year plan. The text that came through at exactly 2:43 p.m. wasn't about flowers, seating arrangements, or any of the dozen small details we'd been coordinating for weeks. Sophia informed me that she would be spending Wednesday and Thursday nights at her ex-boyfriend Carter's apartment for what she called emotional closure before our Saturday ceremony. She explained that Carter was struggling with his mother's recent stroke diagnosis and needed emotional support during this incredibly difficult time. She wanted me to understand that this was purely platonic emotional support, nothing more than being there for someone who'd been an important part of her life for several years before we met. She hoped I would be mature enough to recognize how important this was for her mental health and personal growth before taking such a significant step as marriage. She even thanked me in advance for being the kind of understanding and evolved partner who could handle such a delicate situation with grace and wisdom. The message was lengthy and carefully worded, as if she'd been crafting it for hours, explaining how this closure was essential for her to move forward completely committed to our marriage without any lingering emotional baggage or unresolved feelings. I read that message 3 times, sitting in my ergonomic office chair, watching the late afternoon sunlight filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our tech building while my coworkers continued their normal Tuesday routines around me. The casual way she'd presented it, like she was asking permission to grab coffee with a friend or help a neighbor move furniture, told me everything I needed to know about how she viewed our relationship and the value she placed on my feelings. The fact that she'd waited until 3 days before our wedding to spring this on me suggested she'd been planning it for a while, probably hoping I'd be too invested in the upcoming ceremony to object. I typed back a response that would later become the foundation of the most satisfying and strategically perfect 2 days of my entire life. I simply wrote, "Do what you need to do." She responded within minutes with multiple heart emojis and a lengthy message about how much she loved having such a mature and trusting partner, someone who understood that real love meant giving each other space to process complex emotions and personal history. She praised my emotional intelligence and claimed this kind of understanding was exactly why she knew we were meant to be together forever. While she was celebrating my supposed understanding and probably already planning her overnight bags, I was opening my laptop and systematically dismantling our entire wedding operation with the methodical precision I usually reserved for network troubleshooting. I started with the venue cancellation, calling the waterfront location's event coordinator and explaining that we needed to postpone due to an unexpected family emergency. The venue had a strict 72-hour cancellation policy that would cost us our entire deposit, but I'd rather lose $3,000 than watch Sophia walk down that aisle after spending 2 nights with another man under the guise of emotional support. Next came the honeymoon reservations at that boutique resort in the San Juan Islands, followed by the catering company that specialized in Pacific Northwest cuisine, the florist who designed elaborate arrangements with locally sourced flowers, and the string quartet we'd booked months in advance after hearing them perform at a friend's wedding. Each phone call felt like removing a bandage quickly rather than prolonging the inevitable pain, and surprisingly, most vendors were understanding when I explained we had a family crisis that made the celebration inappropriate. By 5:30 p.m., I'd successfully canceled every single vendor, service provider, and reservation associated with our Saturday ceremony, leaving behind a trail of apologetic voicemails and canceled contracts. The only things remaining were dealing with our shared Capitol Hill apartment and extracting my personal belongings before Sophia returned from whatever preparations she was making for her emotional closure adventure. I drove to our place and began the methodical process of packing everything that belonged to me, working with the same systematic approach I used for server migrations at work. I packed my clothes, my electronics, my extensive collection of technical manuals and science fiction novels, and even the expensive espresso machine I'd bought when we first moved in together and she'd complained about the quality of our morning coffee routine. I called a moving company and arranged for them to pick up everything Thursday morning while Sophia would presumably still be processing her complex emotions with Carter. I transferred my half of our shared expenses to her account, closed our joint savings account, and changed my address with the bank, the DMV, and my employer's HR department. Sophia wouldn't be home until late since she was having dinner with her sister Jessica to discuss final wedding preparations and probably to get moral support for her upcoming closure sessions, which gave me plenty of uninterrupted time to execute my exit strategy. The last thing I did before leaving was place her engagement ring on the kitchen counter next to a simple handwritten note that read, "For your closure." I spent Wednesday night in a downtown hotel, ordering room service and watching Netflix while my phone remained completely and blissfully silent, sleeping better than I had in weeks. The explosion began at exactly 10:47 p.m. during Sophia's bachelorette party when her perfect night of celebration transformed into the most public meltdown I could have ever imagined. I was in my hotel room, actually enjoying the peace and quiet while reading a book about network security protocols, when my phone started buzzing with messages from people I hadn't heard from in months. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came from my best man Ryan, who sent me a screenshot of what appeared to be Sophia having a complete breakdown in a bathroom stall. Sophia had chosen to celebrate her last night of freedom at some trendy rooftop bar near Pike Place Market called The Nest, one of those Instagram-worthy spots with Edison bulb lighting and overpriced craft cocktails that she'd been talking about for weeks. Her maid of honor Jessica worked as an event coordinator at the venue, which I'm sure Sophia thought would guarantee them special treatment and perfect photo opportunities for her social media documentation of the evening. The Bride Tribe, as they'd been calling themselves in their group chat that I occasionally saw glimpses of, consisted of 8 women dressed in matching pink tops with custom glitter text celebrating Sophia's upcoming transition to married life. According to the messages flooding my phone from various witnesses and social media posts, everything had been going perfectly until the venue's automated email system sent Sophia a cancellation confirmation message directly to her phone. The timing couldn't have been more devastating from her perspective or more satisfying from mine. Picture this: Sophia in her white sash and plastic tiara, probably in the middle of some Instagram story about her amazing friends and perfect night, when her phone buzzes with an email from the waterfront venue thanking her for her understanding regarding the cancellation and confirming that her deposit would be processed as forfeited due to the short notice. Jessica, who had connections throughout Seattle's event planning community, immediately started making frantic phone calls trying to figure out what had happened, probably assuming there had been some kind of administrative error or system glitch that could be quickly resolved. The other bridesmaids initially thought Sophia was joking when she started showing them the email and laughing hysterically, but the reality set in quickly when Jessica confirmed through her industry contacts that yes, the wedding had been officially canceled by the groom himself on Tuesday afternoon. That's when the real chaos began, and I started receiving a barrage of confused and increasingly frantic calls and texts from Sophia's family and friends who couldn't understand why I would cancel our wedding without discussion or explanation. My phone rang constantly with calls from Sophia's mother Linda, her sister who shared the same name as the maid of honor, various bridesmaids, and even some of her cousins who had traveled from other states specifically for our ceremony and were now wondering about their hotel reservations and plane tickets. I let every single call go to voicemail, maintaining the same calm silence that had served me so well since Tuesday afternoon when I'd begun my strategic dismantling operation. Ryan later told me that his phone had been buzzing nonstop with people trying to reach me through him, demanding to know if I'd suffered some kind of mental breakdown or family emergency that would explain my sudden and apparently inexplicable decision to destroy our carefully planned celebration. The most entertaining part, according to the updates I was receiving through mutual friends who were following the drama unfold on social media in real time, was watching Carter himself start to panic as the reality of the situation became clear and he realized he might actually bear some responsibility for the destruction he'd helped create. Apparently, he began desperately messaging people that his mother's condition had been exaggerated and that nothing inappropriate was planned for his overnight visits with Sophia, suddenly backtracking from the serious family crisis narrative that had justified the closure arrangement. He seemed genuinely shocked that I had taken such drastic action based on what he probably considered a harmless request for emotional support, suggesting he'd either been lying to Sophia about his intentions or was genuinely that delusional about appropriate boundaries between exes and engaged women. Carter's frantic backpedaling included messages to several mutual acquaintances explaining that he'd only asked for Sophia's help because he was feeling overwhelmed and needed a friend to talk through his family situation, completely ignoring the fact that he'd specifically requested she spend 2 nights at his apartment for this emotional processing. The irony of him trying to minimize the situation after Sophia had specifically requested 2 overnight stays for closure wasn't lost on anyone paying attention to the actual details rather than his revised version of events. The night reached its viral peak when someone at the bachelorette party, probably one of the bridesmaids who was less invested in maintaining Sophia's carefully curated public image, recorded and posted a TikTok video of Sophia sobbing on the bathroom floor in her bachelorette tiara while mascara streamed down her face. The video, which I eventually saw after several people sent it to me with various levels of shock and amusement, showed Sophia in complete emotional collapse while her friends tried unsuccessfully to console her and figure out what to do next with their evening and the situation in general. The audio captured someone in the background sarcastically suggesting that maybe Carter could comfort her now, which became the comment that really made the video go viral in our social circle and beyond as people shared it with commentary about entitled brides and karmic justice. By midnight, the hashtag #BridesMeltdown was being used by people who had witnessed the scene, and screenshots of Sophia's emotional breakdown were circulating among wedding vendors throughout Seattle as a cautionary tale about last-minute cancellations and the importance of maintaining professional relationships even when personal drama erupts. Jessica spent the remainder of the evening trying to manage damage control, both for Sophia's emotional state and for her own professional reputation, since having a bride completely fall apart at her venue wasn't exactly great publicity for future events or her standing in the competitive Seattle wedding industry. The bachelorette party ended with most of the women leaving early, some of them clearly uncomfortable with the level of drama and emotional intensity, and others probably eager to share the gossip with their own social circles and get their own social media posts up about the incredible scene they'd witnessed. Sophia, according to Ryan's later detailed report, spent the night at Jessica's apartment, alternating between sobbing phone calls to Carter demanding he somehow fix the situation and angry voice messages to me asking how I could be so cruel and vindictive over what she claimed was an innocent request for friendship support during a difficult time. Sophia's attempt at public relations damage control began Thursday morning with a lengthy Facebook statement that would have been impressive in its audacity if it hadn't been so transparently manipulative and desperate. I woke up in my hotel room to dozens of notifications and messages from friends, family members, and even some coworkers who had seen her post and wanted to know if I was okay or needed any kind of support during what she was describing as my mental health crisis. Her statement, which I screenshot before she eventually deleted it, claimed that I had suffered a sudden psychological breakdown and made paranoid accusations against her innocent request to help a friend in need. She painted herself as the devoted and understanding fiancé who was standing by her troubled partner during his inexplicable emotional episode, suggesting that stress from work and wedding planning had caused me to become irrationally suspicious and controlling. She asked for privacy and prayers during this difficult time while implying that she was the real victim of my unreasonable behavior and mental instability. The post garnered sympathy comments from people who didn't know the full story, with several friends and family members offering to help her through what appeared to be a challenging situation with an unstable partner. I let her narrative stand for exactly 3 hours, giving her enough time to feel confident in her strategy and allowing her supporters to commit to their positions defending her version of events. Then I responded with surgical precision that would make any network security analyst proud, posting screenshots of her original text message requesting 2 nights with Carter for closure, alongside evidence I had gathered that completely destroyed her fabricated story. I had spent Thursday morning doing some investigative work that proved extremely fruitful and satisfying. A quick search of social media and public records revealed that Carter's mother Margaret was not only perfectly healthy but had actually been hosting her weekly book club meeting on Tuesday night, the same evening Sophia claimed she was hospitalized with a stroke. I found photos on Margaret's Instagram account showing her cheerfully discussing their latest selection with 6 other women, all of them looking remarkably healthy and stroke-free. I also discovered that Carter had been posting gym selfies and restaurant check-ins throughout the week, hardly the behavior of someone dealing with a family medical crisis. My response post included these screenshots along with a calm and factual explanation of the timeline, letting the evidence speak for itself without any emotional commentary or personal attacks. I simply presented the facts: Sophia's request for overnight stays with her ex-boyfriend, Carter's fabricated family emergency, and the convenient timing of this closure arrangement just 3 days before our wedding. The reaction was swift and brutal for Sophia's credibility, as people began questioning her integrity and the legitimacy of her victim narrative. Comments poured in supporting my decision and expressing shock at her manipulation, while several mutual friends shared their own stories about suspicious interactions they'd had with Carter in recent months. The situation escalated dramatically when Sophia decided that a public Facebook exchange wasn't sufficient to resolve what she clearly saw as a misunderstanding that could be talked through if she could just get me to listen to reason. Thursday evening, she arrived at Ryan's Belltown apartment with what could only be described as a small army of reinforcements, including her parents Linda and Robert, her sister Jessica, and incredibly, Carter himself. Ryan later described the scene as surreal, with this group of people standing in his hallway demanding that I come out and discuss the situation like mature adults who could work through their differences. Linda, who had always been somewhat cold toward me during our relationship, took the lead in what appeared to be a carefully planned intervention designed to pressure me into reconsidering my position and salvaging their family's wedding investment. She explained that I was being unreasonable and that Sophia's request had been completely innocent, motivated only by compassion for someone who was struggling with genuine family trauma. Robert, who had always been more supportive of our relationship, seemed uncomfortable with the entire situation and kept shifting nervously while Linda spoke, suggesting he might not have been fully briefed on the details of Sophia's closure arrangement. The most surreal part of this confrontation, which Ryan captured on his doorbell camera and later shared with me, was watching Carter attempt to defend his role in the situation while standing next to the woman whose wedding he had helped destroy. He awkwardly tried to explain that he had only reached out to Sophia because he trusted her judgment and needed someone to help him process his emotions about his mother's condition, conveniently ignoring the fact that his mother was perfectly fine and actively hosting social gatherings. The video, which eventually made its way onto social media when someone recognized the participants, shows Carter becoming increasingly flustered as he tries to justify why he specifically needed Sophia to spend 2 consecutive nights at his apartment for this emotional support rather than meeting for coffee or talking on the phone like normal friends would do. The most damaging moment in the entire confrontation came when Sophia, apparently frustrated by Carter's weak defense and my continued absence from the discussion, admitted that she had needed to explore unresolved feelings before committing to marriage, essentially confirming that the closure arrangement was exactly what I had suspected it to be. This admission, captured clearly on the doorbell camera audio, completely undermined her previous claims about innocent friendship support and revealed the true nature of her intentions. Jessica tried to minimize the statement by suggesting that Sophia was just being honest about the normal doubts that many people experience before major life commitments, but the damage was done and everyone present understood that Sophia had essentially confessed to planning what amounted to a pre-wedding affair disguised as compassionate friend support. Ryan handled the entire situation with remarkable composure, explaining that I was not available for discussion and that anyone who wanted to communicate with me could do so through appropriate channels rather than showing up uninvited at his home with demands and ultimatums. The group eventually left after it became clear that their intervention strategy had backfired completely, with Carter looking particularly uncomfortable as the reality of his situation began to sink in and Sophia becoming increasingly agitated as her various narratives continued to fall apart under scrutiny. Saturday morning arrived with what could only be described as the most beautifully chaotic wedding day disaster I could have possibly orchestrated, complete with confused guests, corporate retreats, and a legendary family confrontation that would become Seattle's social media folklore for months afterward. Despite having canceled every single vendor and service associated with our ceremony, approximately 40 confused guests arrived at the waterfront venue expecting to witness my marriage to Sophia, only to discover that the entire space had been transformed for a weekend corporate tech retreat complete with motivational speakers and team-building exercises. I watched the unfolding chaos from my hotel room through social media posts and updates from Ryan, who had positioned himself strategically to observe the situation without getting directly involved in what was rapidly becoming a spectacle worthy of reality television. The contrast was absolutely perfect. Wedding guests in formal attire and expensive dresses wandering around looking for ceremony seating while startup employees in hoodies and sneakers set up laptops for their productivity workshops and networking sessions. Several of our older relatives, including Sophia's grandmother, had apparently traveled significant distances and spent considerable money on outfits and accommodations, only to find themselves standing in a conference room filled with whiteboards covered in business jargon and motivational quotes about disrupting traditional industries. The venue staff, who were completely professional throughout the entire situation, tried to explain to confused guests that the wedding had been canceled and that they were welcome to enjoy the beautiful waterfront views but would need to leave the actual event spaces to the corporate retreat participants. This led to an increasingly surreal scene where people in wedding attire were mingling awkwardly with tech workers while both groups tried to figure out what was happening and whether they were supposed to be sharing the space somehow. The situation escalated dramatically when Sophia and her mother Linda arrived around noon, apparently having held onto some desperate hope that they could somehow salvage the day by negotiating with the venue or convincing the staff to accommodate a last-minute ceremony in whatever space might be available. Linda, dressed in what was clearly an expensive mother-of-the-bride outfit complete with a coordinating hat and jewelry, began demanding to speak with management about what she characterized as a catastrophic breakdown in customer service and professional responsibility. The venue's event coordinator patiently explained that the wedding had been properly canceled according to their policies and that the space had been legitimately rebooked for the corporate event, but Linda refused to accept this explanation and began threatening legal action against what she called incompetent staff who had obviously made some kind of administrative error. Sophia, meanwhile, was frantically calling and texting anyone she thought might be able to help her secure an alternative venue for an immediate ceremony, apparently still believing that if she could just find a space and gather enough people together, she could somehow pressure me into showing up and going through with the marriage as originally planned. The most dramatic and ultimately legendary moment occurred when Carter's mother Margaret arrived at the venue, having been told by her son that he was getting married and that she should come to support him during this important life milestone. Margaret, a dignified woman in her 60s who had dressed appropriately for what she believed was her son's wedding, quickly discovered the truth about both the fabricated stroke story and Carter's actual role in destroying someone else's engagement rather than celebrating his own marriage. The confrontation between Margaret and both Carter and Sophia became the stuff of social media legend among everyone who witnessed it, with Margaret's voice carrying clearly across the waterfront venue as she expressed her absolute horror at discovering how her son had manipulated the situation. She had apparently spent days worrying about her supposed stroke symptoms and feeling guilty that her medical crisis was causing stress for Carter, only to learn that he had used her fabricated illness as an excuse to sleep with another man's fiancée just days before that man's wedding. Margaret's public confrontation with Carter was both devastating and absolutely justified, as she demanded to know how he could have told people she was dying to facilitate his affair with an engaged woman, adding that she had raised him to have better moral standards than what she was witnessing. The confrontation with Sophia was equally brutal, with Margaret pointing out that any decent woman would have recognized the inappropriateness of Carter's request and wondering what kind of person uses someone else's supposedly critical medical situation as an excuse for romantic closure arrangements. The security footage from this encounter, which was later shared widely throughout Seattle's social media networks, shows Margaret's righteous anger as she tells both Carter and Sophia that their behavior represents everything wrong with modern relationships and basic human decency. Several wedding guests captured portions of this confrontation on their phones, and the videos quickly went viral with commentary about karmic justice and the importance of respecting other people's relationships and family members. The entire scene reached peak absurdity when Linda tried to defend Sophia's actions to Margaret, explaining that young people today have different approaches to relationships and that emotional closure arrangements are perfectly normal and healthy ways to process complex feelings before major life commitments. Margaret's response to this explanation became one of the most quoted moments from the entire debacle, as she told Linda that enabling her daughter's selfish behavior was exactly how families raise children who grow up to destroy other people's lives without considering the consequences. By mid-afternoon, the venue had become a gathering place for people who weren't even originally invited to the wedding but had heard about the chaos through social media and came to witness the spectacle firsthand, turning what should have been an intimate ceremony into an unintentional public entertainment event. The corporate retreat participants, meanwhile, found themselves inadvertently part of a viral social media story as their team-building exercises provided the backdrop for one of the most dramatic wedding disasters in recent Seattle memory, with several of them posting their own commentary about the surreal experience of attending a business conference that had been crashed by a wedding that didn't exist. The wedding fallout triggered a domino effect of relationship destruction that continued for months after the initial disaster, creating a cascade of consequences that reached far beyond just Sophia and me into the lives of everyone who had been peripherally involved in our engagement and the subsequent drama. The first major casualty was Sophia's living situation, as she discovered that without my financial contribution, she couldn't afford the rent on our shared Capitol Hill apartment that we'd chosen specifically because it was slightly above her individual budget but manageable with both our incomes combined. Her marketing coordinator salary, which had always seemed adequate when supplemented by my network administrator income, suddenly proved insufficient to maintain the lifestyle and living standards she'd become accustomed to during our 3-year relationship. The eviction process began within 6 weeks when she failed to make the full rent payment, and rather than finding a more affordable place or taking on a roommate, she made the decision to move into Carter's cramped studio apartment above his uncle's auto repair shop in Georgetown, a neighborhood that was significantly less trendy and Instagram-worthy than the Capitol Hill location she'd been forced to abandon. Carter's studio, which I later heard described by mutual friends who had visited, was essentially a converted storage space with a kitchenette, a Murphy bed, and a single window overlooking the auto shop's parking lot where customers left their damaged vehicles, creating a view that was dramatically different from the coffee shops and boutiques she'd enjoyed in our previous neighborhood. Even more satisfying than Sophia's housing downgrade was the complete implosion of her parents' 30-year marriage, which began unraveling when Robert discovered that Linda had not only encouraged Sophia's closure arrangement but had actively pushed for it because she believed Carter had inherited substantial money from a recent lawsuit settlement and would therefore be a more financially advantageous match than me. Robert, who had always treated me with respect and seemed to appreciate my stability and commitment to his daughter, was apparently horrified to learn that his wife had been scheming to break up our engagement based on completely inaccurate assumptions about Carter's financial situation and my long-term earning potential as a network administrator. The revelation that Linda had been secretly researching Carter's background and family finances while simultaneously undermining my relationship with Sophia led to explosive confrontations between the parents that became neighborhood gossip in their suburban community. Linda's long-standing contempt for what she characterized as my mediocre career prospects and middle-class background became a central issue in their marital breakdown, as Robert realized that his wife had been actively working against their daughter's happiness based on her own materialistic values and social climbing aspirations. Robert filed for divorce within 3 months of the wedding disaster, citing irreconcilable differences and Linda's manipulative interference in their children's relationships as evidence of fundamental character flaws that made their marriage unsustainable. The divorce proceedings revealed additional layers of Linda's scheming, including her attempts to convince Sophia that I was holding her back from achieving her full potential and her efforts to arrange casual encounters between Sophia and Carter at various social events over the months leading up to our engagement disaster. The wedding venue scandal had far-reaching consequences throughout Seattle's event planning industry, as multiple venues began blacklisting both Sophia and Linda after their disruptive behavior created a network of warnings among event coordinators who shared information about difficult clients and potential problems. Linda's threats of legal action against the waterfront venue, combined with her demands for special accommodations after the legitimate cancellation, earned her a reputation as someone who couldn't be trusted to honor contracts or behave professionally during events. Sophia's association with the viral social media disaster made her equally undesirable to venues who were concerned about potential drama, negative publicity, or social media complications that might arise from hosting events for someone whose previous wedding had become an internet sensation for all the wrong reasons. This blacklisting effectively ended any hopes Sophia might have had for planning future weddings in the Seattle area, as the event planning community proved to be surprisingly small and interconnected, with coordinators regularly sharing client information and warnings about potential problems. Carter's family relationships suffered their own dramatic collapse when Margaret shared the security footage from the venue confrontation with Carter's father and other relatives, leading to a complete financial cutoff that left Carter struggling to maintain even his basic living expenses. His family, who had been providing various forms of support including help with his apartment deposit and car payments, were horrified by his behavior and the way he had used his mother's fabricated medical crisis to facilitate what they correctly identified as an affair with an engaged woman. The loss of family financial support meant that Carter couldn't afford the lease on his studio apartment, forcing him to ask his uncle for permission to live above the auto shop in exchange for part-time work that paid significantly less than his previous job and required him to wear coveralls that were definitely not compatible with the sophisticated image he'd been trying to project. Carter's uncle, who apparently had strong opinions about family responsibility and moral behavior, made it clear that the living arrangement was temporary and conditional on Carter demonstrating better judgment in his personal relationships and life choices. The social media fallout continued to follow Carter wherever he went, as the combination of the doorbell camera footage, the venue confrontation videos, and Margaret's righteous anger had made him recognizable to people throughout Seattle's social scene who associated him with relationship destruction and family manipulation. Several of his previous dating prospects, who learned about his role in the wedding disaster through mutual friends and social media connections, ended their relationships with him rather than being associated with someone who had such a public reputation for inappropriate behavior with engaged women. 6 months after what should have been our wedding day, the contrast between my thriving new life and Sophia's increasingly desperate situation became so stark that even mutual friends began commenting on the dramatic difference in our respective trajectories and overall happiness levels. Carter had proven to be everything I suspected he would be and worse, refusing to commit to any kind of serious relationship with Sophia despite her having sacrificed her engagement, her apartment, her family relationships, and her social standing to be with him. His excuse, which he shared freely with anyone who would listen, was that his recent spiritual journey had led him to reject traditional institutions like marriage as outdated social constructs that limited personal growth and authentic self-expression. This philosophical stance conveniently ignored the fact that he had specifically used Sophia's desire for commitment and closure to destroy her relationship with me, suggesting that his enlightenment was remarkably selective and self-serving when it came to avoiding responsibility for the chaos he had helped create. Sophia found herself trapped in exactly the situation that every woman fears most, having left a stable, committed relationship for someone who turned out to be completely unwilling to provide the security and partnership she had assumed would naturally follow from their romantic connection. Carter continued his pattern of pursuing other women through various dating apps and social media platforms, making no effort to hide his activities from Sophia despite the fact that they were supposedly in an exclusive relationship that she had destroyed her entire life to obtain. His behavior became increasingly brazen as he realized that Sophia had no real alternatives and was essentially stuck with whatever treatment he chose to provide, having burned her bridges with me and most of her social circle in pursuit of their relationship. Sophia's attempts to maintain a facade of happiness on social media became increasingly desperate and transparent, with carefully curated photos of their authentic love that were obviously staged to hide the reality of their living situation and relationship dynamics. She posted images of romantic dinners that were clearly taken at chain restaurants rather than the upscale establishments she had frequented during our relationship, and her captions about finding real love and authentic connection became longer and more defensive as months passed without any signs of progression toward the commitment she had expected. The most pathetic aspect of her social media performance was her obvious desperation to recreate the engagement and wedding dreams she had destroyed, particularly after her younger sister announced her own engagement to a successful engineer who had proposed with a substantial ring and elaborate romantic gesture. Sophia's comments on her sister's engagement posts were painfully transparent attempts to suggest that she and Carter were also moving toward marriage, despite his public statements about rejecting traditional relationship structures and his continued pursuit of other women on dating platforms. Meanwhile, my life had transformed in ways that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for post-breakup recovery and personal growth. The promotion to senior network architect had come with not only a substantial salary increase but also the opportunity to work on cutting-edge projects that challenged my technical skills and provided genuine career satisfaction. The additional income allowed me to move into a beautiful apartment in Belltown with spectacular views of Elliott Bay, the same waterfront area where our wedding was supposed to have taken place, creating a satisfying sense of reclaiming that space for positive memories rather than painful associations. More importantly, I had begun a relationship with Maya, an environmental scientist who worked for a nonprofit organization focused on Puget Sound restoration and had the kind of genuine intelligence and passion for her work that made our conversations endlessly fascinating. I met Maya at a community garden volunteer event where we both spent Saturday mornings helping to maintain vegetable plots for low-income families, and our relationship had developed naturally through shared values and compatible life goals rather than physical attraction or social pressures. Maya found my entire wedding disaster story both hilarious and evidence of my integrity, commenting that anyone who would handle such a betrayal with strategic precision rather than emotional chaos was exactly the kind of partner she wanted in her own life. Her reaction to learning about Sophia's closure request was immediate laughter followed by genuine amazement that someone could be so transparently manipulative while expecting their partner to accept such obvious disrespect. Maya's own relationship history included several long-term partnerships that had ended amicably, and she appreciated my decision to avoid drama and conflict in favor of simply removing myself from a situation that was clearly unworkable. Our weekend trips to mountain cabins for hiking and stargazing provided exactly the kind of peaceful, authentic connection that I had been missing during the final months of my relationship with Sophia, when every interaction had felt calculated or performance-based rather than genuinely intimate. Maya's environmental work meant that she was often covered in dirt from field research or smelling like saltwater from marine sampling, and I found this authentic engagement with her career incredibly attractive compared to Sophia's constant concern with maintaining perfect appearances for social media documentation. The contrast between Maya's genuine enthusiasm for discussing restoration ecology and Sophia's self-absorbed focus on lifestyle branding became one of many reminders that I had escaped a relationship that was fundamentally incompatible with my values and personal growth goals. Maya and I began making plans for a cross-country camping trip to visit national parks, something that would have been impossible with Sophia due to her requirements for luxury accommodations and Instagram-worthy dining experiences. The peaceful satisfaction of planning adventures with someone who shared my interests and values felt like emerging from a fog of constant compromise and accommodation that I hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. Friends and family members who had known me during my relationship with Sophia commented frequently on how much happier and more relaxed I seemed, with several people mentioning that they had been concerned about my stress levels and general demeanor during the final year of our engagement but hadn't felt comfortable expressing their reservations at the time. The final revelations about Sophia's true character and the extent of her premeditated deception came nearly a year after our canceled wedding, when Jessica finally broke her silence and revealed information that transformed my understanding of the entire situation from a moment of poor judgment into a carefully orchestrated plan that had been months in the making. Jessica, who had been struggling with guilt about her role in enabling Sophia's behavior and had apparently been seeking therapy to process her complicity in the wedding disaster, reached out to me through LinkedIn with a message that began with an apology and ended with evidence that Sophia's closure arrangement had been anything but spontaneous or innocent. According to Jessica's detailed confession, Sophia had been secretly planning her encounter with Carter for at least 3 months before she sent me that devastating text message, including purchasing expensive lingerie specifically for the occasion and researching couples' retreat locations where they could continue their relationship after my presumed acceptance of their arrangement. Jessica provided screenshots of shopping receipts for luxury intimate apparel that Sophia had bought weeks before, claiming she needed emotional support for Carter's family crisis, along with browser history showing searches for romantic weekend getaways and relationship counseling services that specialized in helping couples transition from affairs to legitimate relationships. The most damning evidence was a series of text messages between Sophia and Carter that Jessica had accidentally received in a group chat, revealing that they had been coordinating their story about his mother's health crisis and planning specific details about how to present their request to me in a way that would minimize my objections and maximize my compliance with their deceptive arrangement. These messages showed Sophia strategizing about the best timing for her revelation and Carter suggesting that the stroke story would be more compelling than other potential family emergencies because it would create urgency and emotional pressure that would be difficult for me to resist or question without appearing callous and unsympathetic to genuine family suffering. The revelation that Sophia's entire closure narrative had been a fabrication designed to facilitate an ongoing affair while maintaining the security of our engagement was devastating in its calculated cruelty and manipulation, suggesting a level of premeditation and deception that exceeded even my worst assumptions about her character and intentions during our 3-year relationship. Even more shocking was the information that came from Carter's ex-wife Patricia, who contacted me through LinkedIn several weeks after Jessica's confession with warnings about Carter's established pattern of pursuing engaged and married women using identical crisis scenarios involving fabricated family emergencies and health scares. Patricia explained that Carter had destroyed at least 3 other relationships using variations of the same story about medical crises requiring emotional support from specific women who were committed to other partners, suggesting that his pursuit of Sophia was part of a calculated strategy rather than genuine feelings or spontaneous emotional needs during a difficult time. According to Patricia's detailed account, Carter had developed this approach during their marriage when she discovered his affairs with 2 different women who had both been engaged to other men when he initiated contact claiming to need support during family health crises that later proved to be completely fabricated for the purpose of creating intimate emotional connections. Carter's pattern involved identifying women who were approaching major relationship milestones like engagements or marriages, then creating fictional emergencies that required their specific support and presence, gradually escalating the emotional intimacy until they were willing to risk their existing relationships for what they believed was a deeper connection with someone who truly needed their unique understanding and compassion. Patricia's evidence included documentation of Carter's previous affairs and the remarkably similar stories he had used to manipulate other women, including fake hospital visits, fabricated family crises, and elaborate emotional manipulation designed to make his targets feel special and needed during supposedly vulnerable moments in his life when he required their particular form of comfort and support. The final twist in this already incredible saga came when Sophia discovered Carter's active dating profile while using his laptop to apply for jobs, leading to a public confrontation at their local coffee shop that resulted in a restraining order and Sophia's immediate eviction from his studio apartment above the auto repair shop in Georgetown. The coffee shop incident, which was witnessed by numerous customers and later reported extensively on social media, involved Sophia screaming at Carter about his continued pursuit of other women despite her sacrifices and his implied promises about their future together, with Carter responding that he had never made any commitments to her and that she had completely misunderstood the nature of their relationship from the very beginning. The restraining order came after Sophia allegedly threw Carter's laptop across the coffee shop and threatened to expose his dating activities to his family and employer, leading Carter to claim that she was unstable and dangerous to his personal safety and professional reputation in the community. Sophia's eviction from the studio apartment forced her to move back in with her parents, who were in the middle of their own contentious divorce proceedings and blamed her entirely for the destruction of their family stability and social standing in their suburban community where everyone knew about the wedding disaster. Linda and Robert's divorce had become increasingly bitter as more details emerged about Linda's manipulation and scheming, with Robert seeking sole custody of their younger children and Linda facing social isolation from their former friend group who had learned about her role in orchestrating the wedding disaster for financial gain. Looking back on the entire experience with the clarity that comes from distance and new information, I realized the warning signs had been present throughout our relationship, including Sophia's constant comparisons to other couples and their financial situations, her secretive phone behavior and social media activities, and her repeated comments about how lucky she was to have found someone stable like me, as if stability was a consolation prize rather than a genuine attraction or foundation for lasting partnership. The wedding cancellation had saved me not only from years of misery and inevitable divorce proceedings but also from the financial devastation that would have resulted from Sophia's continued deception and Carter's ongoing manipulation of our relationship for his own entertainment and ego gratification at my expense.